The coffee hadn't even arrived yet. That was the part nobody talked about afterward. The fact that Rowan Achibi and his friend had been sitting in that booth for less than 4 minutes when the manager walked over. 4 minutes. Not long enough to open a menu properly. Not long enough to decide between the breakfast sandwich and the eggs Benedict. Not long enough to do anything at all except exist in a space where, apparently, someone had already decided they didn't belong. It was a Tuesday morning in late September in a mid-sized town called Hartwell, about 90 minutes east of Toronto. The kind of town that had a farmer's market on Saturdays and a heritage walking tour that nobody took. The cafe was called the Birchwood, exposed brick walls, mason jar lights, a chalkboard menu that changed every season, the sort of place that put locally sourced and community-minded in its window decal and meant every word of it, right up until it didn't. Rowan had driven up the night before. He was 41 years old, compact and quiet in the way that certain people are quiet. Not shy, not uncertain, but economical. He didn't waste words. He had learned a long time ago that the world rarely gave him credit for the ones he did use, so he chose them carefully. He had a habit of watching rooms before he entered them, taking in where the light fell, where people sat, what the energy felt like. Some people called it caution. He called it information. His friend was Devin Okori, 38, a civil engineer who had driven up from Hamilton specifically to spend the morning with Rowan before a site meeting in the afternoon. They had known each other since university. They had the kind of friendship that could survive years of distance, and then pick up in the middle of a sentence. Devin was the louder of the two, not obnoxious, just warm, the type of person who made wait staff feel seen without trying. He had already smiled at the young woman who handed them menus, asked her name, thanked her by it. They were the only two black men in the cafe. That wasn't unusual. Hartwell was not a diverse town. Rowan had grown up in places like it, had learned the particular arithmetic of those rooms. How many people looked up when you walked in? How long they kept looking, whether the looking was curious or something harder. He was used to it. Being used to something is not the same as it being acceptable. He had simply learned to hold both truths at once. Devin was talking about a bridge project outside Hamilton, something about load calculations and a subcontractor who kept sending the wrong grade of rebar when the manager appeared at the end of the table. His name was Craig Fosson. He was in his mid-50s, thick through the shoulders, with a graying mustache and the careful, practiced ease of someone who had been managing people his entire adult life. He wore a dark green apron over a flannel shirt. He looked like the kind of man who coached minor hockey and knew everyone at the hardware store by first name. He probably did. He did not ask if they needed anything. He did not introduce himself. He said, "Can I help you with something?" Devin paused mid-sentence. The question hung in the air. "We're good," Devin said. "Just waiting on coffee." Craig Fosson nodded slowly, the way people nod when they're not really agreeing with you. His eyes moved to Rowan, then back to Devin. "You from around here?" "Visiting," Rowan said. Visiting who? That was the moment. That was the precise moment when everyone in the cafe who was paying attention, and several people had started paying attention, understood that something was happening that was not about coffee. Devin set his menu down. "I'm sorry?" "Just making conversation," Craig said, but his posture hadn't changed. He was still standing at the end of the table like a man who owned the floor beneath his feet, which, technically, he did. "We get a lot of people passing through. Like to know who's in my place." Rowan said nothing. He had picked up his coffee mug, empty. The server hadn't come back yet, and was turning it slowly in his hands. "Watching. We're here for breakfast," Devin said. "That's generally what people do in a cafe." "Ah, sure." Craig Fosson smiled, the way some men smile when they want you to feel like you're overreacting. "I'm just saying, if you're looking for something specific, there's a Tim Hortons on the main road. Might be more your speed." The cafe went still. Not suddenly, not with a gasp. It went still the way a room goes still when something shifts in the air. The couple at the window booth, lowering their forks. The man at the counter, turning slightly without turning all the way. the young server, frozen near the espresso machine with a cloth in her hand, looking at the floor. Nobody said anything. There were 11 people in the Birchwood that morning, not counting Craig, not counting Rowan and Devon. 11 people who heard what was said. 11 people who understood what it meant. Not one of them spoke. Devon looked at Rowan. Rowan was still turning the mug in his hands, a slow, deliberate rotation. His face had not changed. "We'll have the breakfast plates," Rowan said, addressing this to a point somewhere past Craig's left shoulder, toward where the server was still standing with her cloth. "2 coffees, and we'd like to finish our conversation if that's all right." Craig Fawson stared at him for a moment. Then he said, quietly, in the particular register that men like him used when they wanted to make something sound like courtesy, "I think it might be better if you found somewhere else this morning." "Better for who?" Devon said. "For everyone." Devon's jaw tightened. Rowan put down the mug. "We haven't done anything," Devon said. "We sat down. We looked at the menu. That's it. I'm not saying you did anything." Craig's voice had taken on a patient, explanatory quality, as if he were talking to someone who was having trouble understanding simple information. "I'm asking you, politely, to take your business elsewhere. This is a private establishment, and I have the right." "You have the right," Rowan said. "To seat or not seat whoever you want, yes. And we have the right to be very clear about the reason it's asking us to leave." A beat. "I think you know the reason," Craig said. He said it quietly. He said it like a man who was confident there would be no consequences for saying it, and looking around at the 11 silent people in the cafe, at the untouched forks, the lowered eyes, the careful arrangement of gazes toward windows and phones and tabletops. He had every reason to believe he was right. Rowan stood up. Devon stood up beside him. They didn't leave. Rowan reached into the interior pocket of his jacket, a good jacket, dark navy, well cut, the kind of jacket that cost what it looked like it cost, and removed a slim leather folio. He set it on the table between them and Craig Fawson. He opened it. Inside was an identification card and a letter on official letterhead. Craig looked at it. His expression did not change immediately. That was the interesting thing. The change came slowly, like a tide going out. The confidence first, then the patience, then the careful constructed ease, until what was left was something rawer and less managed. The letter was from the regional municipality. It confirmed the appointment, effective the following Monday, of Rowan Achibi as the new Director of Business, Licensing, and Bylaw Compliance for the region of Hartwell-Peel, which meant, among other things, that Craig Fawson's annual cafe operating permit, the document that allowed the Birchwood to exist as a legal food service establishment, would be processed and approved by the office now under Rowan's authority. "I start Monday," Rowan said. "I came up early to get a feel for the town." He looked at Craig for a moment, not unkindly, not with triumph, just steadily, the way a person looks at someone when they want to make sure they are being clearly understood. "I've been in this business a long time. I'm very good at it. I find that the businesses in a community that treat people well tend to do well. The ones that don't," he paused, "find themselves with a surprising number of compliance reviews." He picked up the folio, tucked it back into his jacket, buttoned the single button. "We'll find somewhere else for breakfast," he said. "Have a good day." Devon nodded at the server, who was still standing near the espresso machine, who had watched the entire thing with the expression of someone who had wanted to say something and hadn't, and would be thinking about that for a long time. "Thank you," Devon said, to her specifically, not to the room. They walked out. The bell above the door rang once when they left. Nobody moved for several seconds after. What happened next came in pieces, the way these things always do in small towns. The server, her name was Meg. She had worked at the Birchwood for 2 years to save money for her second year of nursing school, told her roommate that night. Her roommate told 2 people. By Thursday, a version of the story had made its way through 3 separate Facebook community groups for the Hartwell area. Each version slightly different from the favorite, all of them containing this essential truth. Someone who had been sitting at the window booth that morning wrote a post. It was long and specific. and to their credit, did not try to minimize what they had failed to do. They wrote, "I sat there and I said nothing. I want to be honest about that. I have been thinking about it for 2 days, and I want to be honest about what it means to stay quiet when you can see something is wrong." The post got 412 shares. Craig Fawson did not lose his Café license. That is important to say clearly, because the story is not about that. No single compliance review was ever filed. Rowan Achibi, when asked later about the incident by a journalist from a regional paper doing a piece on his appointment, said only that he believed in fair process and that his office would treat all businesses consistently and professionally. He meant it. He was not that kind of person, the kind who uses power as a weapon simply because the opportunity presents itself. He had spent his career watching that kind of person and had decided early on that he would not become one. What Craig Fawson did lose was harder to measure and more permanent. 3 of his regular morning tables stopped coming. Quietly, without announcement, they just didn't come back. The window couple hadn't returned since that Tuesday. Meg gave her notice the following week. In her resignation letter, which she kept professional and brief, she cited a desire to pursue her studies full-time. She did not mention the morning with the 2 men in the booth. She didn't have to. The community-minded decal stayed in the window. Nobody took it down. But people in Hartwell had long memories and short patience for the difference between what a place claimed to be and what it actually was. Rowan started work the following Monday. The regional office was a flat-roofed building near the Civic Center, the kind of institutional space that had been renovated twice without ever quite deciding what it wanted to look like. His office was on the 2nd floor, with a window that looked out over a parking lot, and beyond it, the back end of the farmer's market pavilion. On Saturdays, he could hear it from his desk. The distant conversation, the particular cheerfulness of outdoor stalls, the sound of a town believing in itself. He kept a photograph on his desk. Not his family, not a landscape, not a motivational quote. A photograph of his father's tailor shop on Eglinton Avenue, taken sometime in the early 90s. His father had come from Nigeria with a suitcase and a particular set of skills, and had spent 30 years being told in various ways that he was not quite what was expected. He had made something anyway. The shop was still there. Different name now, different owner, but still there. Rowan looked at it sometimes when he needed to remember what he was doing and why. He was not the first person from his background to hold his position. He was not naive enough to think that his presence alone changed the systems he was now working within. But he was good at his job, genuinely, demonstrably good, in ways that were documented and measurable, and he had long since stopped needing anyone to tell him so. His assistant, a young woman named Claire, who had worked in the office for 3 years, and had initially greeted his appointment with polite professional neutrality, came to trust him within 6 weeks. Not because he asked her to, because he showed up every day and did the work, and treated her like someone whose opinion was worth having, which it was. She had a particular gift for anticipating problems before they arrived, which Rowan recognized immediately and told her so without making a production of it. The town adjusted, the way towns do, to the fact of him. 4 months after that Tuesday morning at the Birchwood, Devon came back up to Hartwell. They found a different cafe, a newer one, run by a woman in her 30s who had opened it after years of working in restaurant kitchens in Toronto, who came out from behind the counter to shake Rofan's hand when he told her where he worked, who brought them coffee without being asked and asked how they took it. They sat at a table by the window. Outside, the main street was quiet in the way November streets in small Ontario towns are quiet. Frost on the edge of the awnings, the hardware store putting up Christmas lights, a woman walking a dog that kept trying to stop at every storefront. Devon said, "You never told me." In the car, after we left, "You never said anything." Rowan wrapped both hands around his mug. "What was there to say?" "I don't know. You must have felt something." "Of course I felt something." He was quiet for a moment. "I felt it before, you have too." Devon nodded. "The difference," Rowan said, "is that this time it happened in a room where I had an answer." He looked out the window at the hardware store, at the man on the ladder with the string of lights. Most of the time, he said, you don't have an answer. You just have to carry it. That's the part people don't write about. The walking out of a room with nothing but your own dignity and no proof that anyone in there understood why. Devon said nothing. I was lucky this time, Rowan said, and I know that. I know what it means that I was lucky. The coffee was good. The cafe was warm. Outside, the man got the lights working, and a small section of the hardware store awning lit up in white. Devon raised his mug slightly. Rowan raised his. They didn't say anything. They didn't have to. There were 11 people in the Birchwood the morning Craig Fawson asked 2 men to leave his cafe for no reason he was willing to say out loud. 11 people who heard it happen and looked at their plates. There are people like that in every room, in every town, in every country. People who are not the ones doing the harm, but who are not the ones stopping it either. People who have, afterward, a long and uncomfortable time in the space between those two things. Rowan Achebe did not need them to have done differently in order to survive that morning. He had spent his whole life not needing that. But here is the question that stays, the one that doesn't resolve easily. What would you have done? Not what you would like to have done. Not what the best version of you, in a hypothetical, would have done. What would you have actually done, sitting at your table, holding your coffee, watching something happen that you knew was wrong? Because the answer to that question, the honest one, the one you sit with privately, says more about a community than any decal in any window ever could.